All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Committee of the Whole for City of Cedar Falls for Monday, March 16th. Call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Schultz. Latta.
Here.
Nagel.
Here.
Hallbaker. Fairbanks.
Here.
Chrisman. Here. Dunn.
Here.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. So we're just missing Councilor Schultz and Hallbaker. And so that moves us to item number 1, fiscal year 27 budget discussion. And thank you, Jeremy. So for this is kind of for the public's knowledge. This is culmination of our goal setting process back in November, December, kind of getting everybody's priorities for the year. Remember a couple meetings ago, we brought back that max levy that we approved. And then, so this presentation is kind of taking the goal setting and then conversations with each of council, meeting with Jen and I to kind of go through priorities, goals, where you'd like to see the budget fall. And then this is to recommend a final budget and just a few changes that I would recommend going into what we would bring forward in April then for that final budget presentation. And just again for context, once after tonight's discussion, however we move forward, then we'll bring back that full budget book, all the details and everything that then we'd look at for the April meeting. So with that, if you could advance the slides there, Jeremy. Jeremy, you want to move it to the next slide? I think I'll have to ask you to do it, unless I have control on here. Or do I have the clicker? Hold on, let me see if I can. All right, there we go. So again, just timeline reminder, February 16th, we held a meeting on the budget to determine the proposed max rate. March 5th, then we took that to the county, presented that to them, or submitted that to them. March 16th tonight is for that initial presentation by me for what we want to bring forward as that final published levy. So March 26th is when we would publish the notice for that special meeting date. And then April 6th is when we'll hold that special council meeting. If you remember, we have to have a separate meeting from the normal meeting for that. And then also at the April 6th, then we would set that public hearing date for the approval of the final budget, which would be published on the 9th. And then the 20th is when we would do that final budget approval to send to the state. So this here is what we had submitted as the max levy. So if you remember, this was looking at a levy rate of $12.29, which put us at an actual, once you calculate in the rollback, the property tax changes, and then the levy rate would have been about a 4.04% increase on the total amount spent by residents toward property taxes. So bringing forward then there are a few things. Looking at it with staff and then based on input from everyone, a couple of the recommendations we're doing here is, if you remember, for two of them, for the zoning ordinance and for the pre-approved home designs, we'd like to propose using the economic development funds that we have for that. And I know a few of you have emailed some questions. We've got about $2 million unallocated in that economic development fund. About $705,000 of that, if you remember, is from last year's budget. We had subtracted $1 million from the UNI funding and used about $295,000 of that in the previous year, planning to keep that $705,000 as capital projects for future year. So this would come out of the economic development fund, and then also looking at then using some of that $705,000 set aside to go toward the public buildings capital and the library capital projects. The impact of that then, you can see here, and this kind of does the individual ones, so you can kind of see the impact of each item and then the cumulative amount. So doing these 4 items here would take about $215,250 off of the levy, and then it would bring that total levy rate down to $12.20, which is our current levy, so it keeps our levy rate the same for this year as last year. And then in that levy increase column right there in the middle, we included this because we know there's some conversations at the state about setting that levy cap on how much we can increase the levy. So that's to show you if that cap were in place today, where we fall on that. So this is about a 2.15% increase on our current levy. What that equates to then, for going back to the numbers here, is that takes our total levy down to that $12.20 again, keeps the levy rate the same, and the percentage change then in the actual outlay, the cost of that is 3.28%. To take that though from the resident perspective, just to make sure we're always looking at it for what's the actual dollars out of pocket. So median home value in the city of Cedar Falls is about $252,500. Current year, that's about a tax rate of $1,461. With the new proposed one, that'd be about $1,509.07. So the total change in that, the increase would be $47.93. Looking at that, we always try to keep in line with about what the inflation rate is, CPI. So CPI for the Midwest for December last year is about 2.7%. So that's about $39.45 of that 47 is really the inflationary amount. And that leaves us a net increase of about $8.48 of what we're increasing that's above inflation. So again, next step is really open for discussion here and looking for a motion from the council or any discussion around taking forward that 1220 levy. And then we would again put together the full budget books, the full budget proposal, and then that would kind of come through the process in April. And then here's the timeline again, just in case you want to review it, in case, Jen, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
And then otherwise with that, I will just open it up to questions, conversation from council.
I'll kick it off, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Question for, I don't know if it's for you or for Jen. So if we take the 705,000 as you're proposing out of the Economic Development Fund, that leaves us with 1.2 and change in there. Is that typical for the amount we would normally have in that account? And explain to me again what that is currently allocated for.
Sure. So we actually have, the mayor mentioned 2 million of unallocated. So we actually have more than that in the true fund, but on the CIP, there's like 12 million designated on the CIP. So I also understand, could you change what's on the CIP for what's designated? Yes, you could do that. But, so I think in terms of you asking what's our normal amount we have, I don't know if we've ever had a normal amount in there because we try to build it up and then we use it to cash flow our projects, you know, so we don't have to bond for them in our TIF district. So I don't know that we've ever had a normal amount in there. You know, other funds, we actually have reserve rates in our policies of what we want to keep them at. We've never really had a required reserved in our economic development. It's never been in the policies. So now, am I concerned about the unallocated 2 million? No, because as you know, like even in the current budget, we're still planning on transferring the 800,000 that we budget in our line item. So, you know, the hope is we'll keep building it up again. So, so it doesn't concern me.
Great, thanks.
And to clarify that, since I know a couple of you asked questions, so the Economic Development Fund is where we do have a line item each year for $800,000 to go into that. Primary expenses, and you can see in the CIP what's budgeted toward that, has usually been industrial park land acquisition, the development costs for that. So it's always been used for projects that lean toward economic growth. I think the main thing, Jen, has always been the industrial park land acquisition development costs.
Yep.
So we have $800,000 a year that goes into that fund. And then again, it's really just our toolbox to use for economic development projects. If a new opportunity comes up to develop a piece of land. Jen, I don't know if I know there was historical funds that were in there beyond just 800,000, but that's kind of the cash inflow and outflow right now is the 800,000 a year is what goes in there.
Right, because we used to have more we were transferring to that, and then a couple years ago when dispatch increased by so much, we actually lowered the amount to economic development to try to offset that increase in the EMA levy.
I'm not sure if this is for the mayor or for Jen, but I know you mentioned briefly the max levy. Mm-hmm. What's the potential downside, or how do we maybe, you know, crystal ball type stuff, but if we back off the max levy and the state institutes a max levy, is that something that could bite us in the future?
Well, I think that was the one thing a little concerned about, and in the presentation, as you know, we've heard a lot about property tax legislation. I think even when our local legislators were here, we heard both parties mention a cap on a levy limit. Now, whether that's 2%, 3%, 4%, or whatever they end up passing. So I think that was the one thing we talked about is that could be something. Is it the right year to drive down our levy? Knowing that that could be our base to determine what's our increase next year. So that could be a downside, that we're decreasing it by 200 and some thousand. So we could have a max next year, right? That could this could be the base, so that is a concern, because we don't know. I mean, I think my concern this year is that I feel like there's a lot of them talking about that levy limit. And so I feel like, is that indicating that's gonna happen now? Again, what that percentage is, don't know.
Yep. Does that answer it, Counselor?
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the rate did pass through the Senate at the House at 2%. So I don't know what the House will do, but the talk was very, very settled on a 2% rate, maybe 2.5%. So that is something to consider. I like the idea of filling the money to the budget to keep the rate down. My only question is, and we'll probably have that conversation, is where the money comes from to do that, and where we're building it from. Is it from a TIF fund or where it's from? Thanks.
And to answer that quick, the $800,000 a year we put into the Economic Development Fund, it was calculated based on when some of those TIFs expire, reserving a portion of that to keep going toward economic development investment. It's no longer TIF, it is just budgeted general fund revenue that goes toward that fund. So essentially, we budget a line item each year of $100 or $800,000 to continue investing in economic development.
So it doesn't automatically go in when it becomes available.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, we choose to budget it as a line item.
Choosing to portion it.
Yep. And I would say that has been part of the conversation around where do we land on this number, is wanting to be accountable for the increase this year, but we do know there is that truth of, I would say, just on the conversations with the state, there will be some sort of levy cap most likely. Everything from 2%, I think the Democrats put 4%, somewhere probably in between there. And then I think one of them, either the House or the Senate, I can't remember, did ratchet a little bit with inflation. So if inflation went up to 6%, you could be up to 3%. It was still always less than inflation.
Yep.
So assuming there'd be something, but that is part of this discussion, and what we need to take into account is it is possible that whatever goes from here on would be kind of that baseline of what we'd have for future budgets.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
For those reasons, that's why I would prefer that we just stay at what we originally had. I think it's probably pretty inevitable that there's going to be a change, whether it's, I think I've heard 2 to 4, obviously 2's passed. I feel like in the end, keeping what we've already set is going to be better for the city in the long run.
Thank you, Counselor. And again, we can go back and show them, if just a reminder that the original one was the 1229.
Correct.
Yep. That's the 4.04%.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I just want to add, I understand that our, policy, be it official or not, is to try to keep, with the cost of, what is it?
Like the CPI.
CPI. But we're not in normal, or we haven't been in normal times for at least a long time, it seems like. So while I understand that, and in a world where legislation isn't constantly changing that hinders cities from providing services that they need to survive or provide or citizens expect, but because of that, then I think it's okay to, and I don't think anything we set was extra. I think the budget itself was pretty conservative. I think everything we've budgeted for, we've discussed all together in, at length in our current process, from goal setting on. So I don't want the community to think that we just willy-nilly are just picking a number, but when you take in the whole story, and again, if people haven't looked into how property tax legislation is affecting municipalities, they really should educate themselves. So that is my reason. It's not to provide additional stress, but in the end, I feel like it will be more stressful when you maybe don't have the services that folks are used to.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll add just from my side, Historically, like, I feel very comfortable where we're at as a city on our property tax rate. You know, of the top 20 cities, we're the sixth, I believe, the sixth lowest levy rate per spending capita, which I think is a better measure of the actual impact in residents. I think we're also the sixth, right about the same. So I think we're comparatively in a very good spot for other communities. And so, again, this was kind of on that recommendation of bringing back from the conversations, what I think balances it well, but I'll say there's a genuine consideration, because really beyond the levy cap, I'd say my concerns actually come more from some of the other things they're proposing around, you know, people over 60 not paying property taxes if they paid off their mortgage, which creates a lot of downline effects on that burden then gets shifted to the rest of residents and how that impacts us in the long run. Us probably less so than some smaller rural communities that are even heavier weighted on that. But so it is just hard to tell where that's going to fall, because it seems like there's still a lot of back and forth on where the state's at.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Just a clarification, Jennifer. So the increase in valuation, even though we're holding at this rate, the city is going to see more money because of the valuation increase than the 2% we're looking at.
Well, you have to keep in mind, though, that the rollback went down by 6%. So even though on a home, assessed value went up 10, the rollback on residential went down by over 6%. So that kind of cuts into the increase you see in the valuations. So no, we won't be able to capture all that increase in valuations, because the state, by lowering the rollback, kind of stripped away some of that increase.
I think that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand.
Right.
You know, they see their tax bill and the valuation. They go, well, if they got the millage rate set where it's at, it's great they kept it there. However, my valuation went up by 50 grand.
Right.
So that's a concern for people, but they don't understand. It's very complicated.
Right. Well, and I think that's why we always like to show that one chart that like showed the 4% on we like to tell that whole story. You know, what's the increase in value? What's the decrease in rollback? What's the change in the rate? That you're right, because we could just say, oh, we're keeping the rate the same, or so your taxes aren't going up. Well, we all know that's not true. So yeah, so I think that's why we like to show it that way.
Thank you.
That's something, again, I give staff a lot of credit for, because you can manipulate these numbers to kind of show any story you wanted to, depending on which number you choose to use. And I think that's why, Jeremy, if you want to put that slide back up, why we've always focused on that bottom number there, because that's really the out-of-the-pocket difference for residents. That's really the cost difference. You know, because even, you're right, even if the levy rate stayed exactly the same, there's still a small increase. So. Any further discussion? Otherwise, we would be looking for a motion on either sticking with the original rate, moving ahead with the one recommended here, or if anybody else motion for any other. But
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I move that we stick with the original set rate.
Second.
Okay, so motion seconded to stick with the original rate, the 1229. I guess we've got the slide up for it if anybody wants to see it, which would be the 4.04% change total. So any motion seconded, so any further discussion on that? And just know, yes vote, we would move forward with that. No vote, we'll come back for continued discussion on any other referrals or any other motions.
Mr. Mayor, question. So if Councilmember Dunn's motion passes, I know we always have the opportunity to go down. Do we still have the opportunity to go down?
You do. Your actual formal vote won't be until that April meeting, because it could be, we have that special meeting on April 6th. You know, you could pass the motion tonight to keep it at the max. Well, you may hear some things at that special meeting on April 6th from the public, and you may think, oh, now I'm hearing that, or I'm hearing concern. I do want to go down, and just like you stated, you can always go down. And so you really have until that April 20th council meeting that you could still go down from 1229, just can't go back, just can't go up from 1229.
And just for my understanding, when does the session in Des Moines allegedly end?
It's
Probably,
usually at the end of April, usually.
Probably after we've
Right,
had to have made a
probably.
Right,
decision,
okay.
conveniently.
Very helpful,
Probably.
thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
I am in favor of the original proposed number because I do feel, like Councilor Dunn said, that it is a conservative number. I think that, we've heard a lot, we talked a lot in goal setting, we've heard a lot from the public that they do have a lot of things that they expect in Cedar Falls that make Cedar Falls a great place to live and work and play. And I think that this budget includes a lot of those things, but is still very conservative. And, we're trying to do things in a way that makes the most sense, but then we also, as a body, have to keep in mind that the state and their decisions do affect the way that we govern locally. And so we, don't want to get into a situation where next year we have to say, we can't fund the library, we can't fund parks, we can't, do these projects that really are the backbone of our community. And so, as much as it is really important to have, great roads for people to drive on and, so many of those public services, I think a lot of that is just a behind the scenes and what people really see that they feel makes their community, Cedar Falls, is these things that require us to look at our levy. And so we really need to make sure that we're making the best decision for the future as well. So I'm in favor of keeping the number just a little bit higher and moving forward with that because of those state concerns. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Just for added context, I do know, just because I just got mine today, the letters did just go out to residents of the proposed max rates. So those should be hitting people's mailboxes right about now.
Mr. Mayor. Being that we shifted money that we already have, which whether you like those monies or not, from my standpoint as citizens have said, if we can keep the rate the same, we haven't affected any services. They're all still the same. Everybody's getting what they want. Everything is funded. There's no reason at this point not to make that move. And I think by doing that, we're showing the citizens that we understand that we are being conscious about the decisions we make. Everything is in the package. I don't see any reason not to go down.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other discussion, comments on the motion to stay with the original 4.04%, the 1229 levy rate? All right, seeing none, since we are voting, we'll go for public input. We've got just staff here, but if you guys would like to have any public input on this, you are welcome to. Otherwise, too, if there's anyone in the hallway, we'll just take a second for any public comment. Chief Howard, if you really want to jump up from out there. All right, otherwise, seeing none, bring it back. Any further discussion? Otherwise, requires just a voice vote. All those in favor of sticking with the 1229?
Aye.
And all opposed?
No.
Okay, so that motion does not carry. So 3-2 and 2 absent. So takes us back.
Mr. Mayor, this particular measure, it's a majority of the quorum.
Oh, so this
For a
majority of the quorum?
substantive measure by council, it takes a majority of the council. For this one, a majority of the quorum will work to move it forward.
Okay, and so I do feel then I will just add just for context, not that it might not change anyone's opinion, but I know Councilor Schultz going to make it. He did express to me that he would prefer to have it at the lower amount. Again, I just know he can't be here. I just assumed since he was an automatic no vote, I wouldn't include that. But again, if it influences anyone's opinion otherwise, just knowing that, we'll do a quick revote if everyone's okay.
Can I say something before
Yeah.
I do that? I understand that, but sometimes when we sit in a conversation together, that can sway. So I'm not, until we sit together, that would influence how I'm going to continue to vote.
So prefer to stick with the vote as it.
I mean, you can do, obviously, as the leader of the meeting as you wish, but I think it's important to remember that when we sit together, I've been swayed before.
Yep.
He may have a feeling of how he would vote, but once we have a conversation, he may
have changed.
change it. And as was said earlier, this is not the final. We can talk about it more the next meeting, so.
Okay, fair point.
Well said, I respect that opinion too.
All right, so that, unless there's any notes otherwise, we'll take that as a confirmation vote then to stick with the original 4.04. And so staff will move ahead with getting that built into the budget books. Everyone will receive the full books. It'll have all the details. Again, if you guys have any questions of anything in the book, if you want to discuss things more, feel free to reach out to myself, Jen, any of the team, and we can jump into it with you. Otherwise, if there's no further discussion, we'll call this meeting adjourned, and we will be back here at 7 o'clock for our regularly scheduled city council meetings. Thank you, everyone.